big parties. I think you've got something going on from a big party in the 1920s on your desk.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You want to hear about this?
Psychic, sure.
Okay, so, all right. So, Lindsay the other week was talking about his dinner party book. This doesn't quite come close to that. This would have been an ongoing journal. I think rather than me put it up and have the camera try to focus on it, Lindsay might put up the photo that I took, a nice scan of the cover. It's a beautiful arts and crafts binding. And it's not like a fancy book at all. It's just a journal. The title is A Book Lover's Notes. And it's designed by two women, Louise and Sarah Smith. And it's the Riley and Britton Co. in Chicago. And I'm going to wait for a card rather than kind of flood the camera. There it is. There it is.
Wow.
Isn't that cool? Here's
That's
what's
gorgeous.
nice. It's not blank. Who wants blank? I want content, right? So it's actually, I just realized I might be hollering because I'm listening through my headphones for the first time.
You're okay. You're okay.
So it has I'm going to turn to the contents page. It's got a section, and she did complete this, for books read and quotations, criticisms and comments. I think of Lindsay when I think of his very astute, amazing kind of biblio assessments. I feel like I should just scan this all so that we can see if there's, wouldn't it be cool, this is the right time period, if we're talking about some of the authors that you guys have brought up on the show. So here's a person in, 1911 and her own interactions with, these characters that she's reading in the books. And, there's a lot of pages that are complete. I'll put it up if you can see it. Let's see.
Very good. Very good.
She just goes on and on. I mean, it's filled. There's a section for books that she wants to read and books that she wants to own and books lent and books borrowed. I just love that it's a little bibliodiary.
Do we know who she is?
I haven't found the name. No, so I haven't really scanned it. I just pulled this out yesterday.
Gilbert Parker. That's a name I recognize as an author.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
She was Victor Hugo, Mussolini. Yeah. 29, I see. I'm trying to, the date range.
Axel Monthly. God, this is like reading an old edition of the AB and Books Wanted.
Exactly. I told Lindsay, I am going to scan this and use, maybe put in a really huge blog entry so that we can really look at what this person from 1910 to 1930, that's the span of the bibliodiary, what they were actually reading in real time. They write it all down in their own hand. And then, like I said, these fabulous pages of their commentary and their criticisms. So this is going to be a bigger project than just like, I'm not going to sell it real fast. I'm going to play with it for a while.
Have you ever seen anything like that before? That's an interest. I mean, it's kind of unique.
I think so. I have seen people documenting in small ways, but this kind of a 20-year run of what they're reading, I haven't. No.
Yeah, it might be an entry. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have, like you said, I've seen a short list. We read this book on our summer vacation, but nothing with the intensity that you're going at there. Nice line.
Thanks. It's fun.
See, that's the problem. Do I keep it or do I sell it?
Well, exactly. I'm gonna work the content for a while and see where we can stretch it. This is totally stretchable,
Thorne, do you have other pictures for this or more to say about it, Kara, before we bring Thorne back in?
You know what I'm going to do is when I get a blog entry written up on this with a little more detail, I'll send you guys a link so you can put a link to it. So maybe if there's anybody interested, they can follow. Because I'd love to put up a list of the books that this person read. And then between you and Thorne and Lindsay's brilliant minds, you guys may have something to say about all of them. So maybe we'll follow up.
I always say a man or a woman, if they read all the books in their library, you got a pretty good psychological profile.
Exactly. Tasteless.
Anything fascinating sitting on your desk now to share with the world?
Well, actually, it's not sitting on my desk. It was an email I got a couple of days ago. And I think we've all, booksellers are in business to make some money because we like books. I personally find the people I've met in the book business through the Rare Book School or cabs or just shows and stuff have turned out to be some of my best friends. But a lot of times, we'll sell a book and it disappears. Sometimes you sell a book and you go, oh man, I wish I still had that. Or, occasionally I do a lot of mail order stuff, and one of them gets lost or whatever, or the U.S. mail does something to it. But I had a gentleman who sent me this email. I sold him a copy of a book called The Royal Philatelic Collection by John Wilson. It's about, the one I sold is a beautiful red leather from the 30s. What it is the British royalties stamp collection. And I guess several of and there's pictures of and you can imagine the royal family of Britain gets some pretty good stamps. I think they used to own the printing plant or something along the yeah. But anyway, so I sent this off to the gentleman, and it was it probably weighed 10. I mean, this thing was that thick. It was huge. We had to go out and buy a special box for it. But it shows back up, and he sends me a letter that goes, "Hello, Thorne. The book arrived well packed yesterday. Thank you." Nothing so much about that. We do know how to pack. But I thought this was really sweet. I mentioned that I was a young stamp collector when this was first published. I wished I could afford to buy it then. I've made do with a tattered red cloth commercial version of this for many years. Again, thank you. And I corresponded with him a couple times, and he showed, apparently he's an older gentleman. I'm turning 65 in 2 weeks, so yay me.
Happy birthday.
Along that line, but he's been collecting for most of his life. And I just had this picture. The one I had was, I think I did grade it near fine. It's true leather and gilt edges, and I don't believe it. Actually, it was from somebody's library, and I would doubt it's ever been opened. And so I just had these pictures of this little old man with his stamp collection and this old tattered red cloth-covered book with ripped pages, and then this. I wish I'd seen his face when this bad boy showed up in the mail.
But when the guy says I had to, when he had the copy since he was a kid and couldn't afford to buy it, those are the heartwarming stories.
Oh, yeah.
If anybody out there is listening to us right now, we would love to hear some of your heartwarming stories, challenging questions, things like that. Remember, if you want to contact us, you can reach us right here, right now, live in a comment box. Lindsay would bring you in if you've got something you want to get on air. You can always reach us at rarebookcafe@gmail.com with questions, posts. Remember, we're on BeLive TV. We'd like to thank everybody at BeLive TV for allowing us to bring this program to you. We look forward to hearing from you and continuing to talk more about books with you. And on that note, Thorne, I'm going to ask you one quick question. What did that book sell for, if I may ask?
I think it was around $350, something like that.
Nice.
Like that.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice. Especially.
I had to go on and tell you that I did look up some of the old cloth ones, and there was one that I forget the term. It said reading copy or something like that. Yeah. And it was, I think, $20 or something. So this guy, you can get a nice copy of the cloth, the standard issue one, for probably $40 to $60. So he sprung some good dollars for his lifetime dream. It was quite pleasing. But there's
Go ahead.
I was just going to say some other things that I was doing. I've been moving around a lot, so I've been reorganizing books. And one of the things that's fun to do about book selling is my interests are probably pre-1860. I like bibliographies. I don't really care for fiction that much, although I do read it. I like history. I wish I was a frustrated history teacher. So the one thing you're hearing me absolutely almost never mention is poetry. Not that I don't like it. I was at a yoga class yesterday and they read poetry. It was great. I even knew a couple of them. But it's just not my strong suit. But as I was rearranging things, I came across a couple books by a gentleman by the name of Donald Hall. And for those who aren't familiar with him, he was the poet laureate of the United States of America in, I think it was this 2006 or something like that. He apparently is still alive. The gentleman in his 80s, went to Harvard and Oxford. And so it's just kind of an interesting thing. And I, years ago, bought an estate for some people that one of her multiple husbands was a critic named Aldrich. He also wrote some books and all that. So I had a couple from that collection that were inscribed. One of them is A Roof of Tiger Lilies, which is one of his more popular books, and it says something about to Leslie and Jack. Jack was the guy's name. And I have nothing to say but thanks, and please stay in Ann Arbor. Apparently, they went up in 1954. I was published in 1952, so that kind of caught. But I had another one there, and it's a book called A String Too Short to Be Saved. And
it sounds familiar.
He apparently was for a number of years the Nobel laureate of the poet laureate of America, and a very well. I hit him on Wikipedia, and his list of honors is incredible. It was one of those things of, oh yeah, a little humble, no idea who this guy is, and probably everybody listening thinks I'm a complete moron, but I did qualify it, not into poetry. So the other thing I had was another one of his books, To Leslie and Jack again, with pleasure in their company. Nothing here really too unusual. But out of the second book, and I do try to collate books, but this one came out of the middle, comes this little handwritten note from Mr. Hall.
What was the heading on it, Thorne? What was the heading? There was a printed heading.
University of Michigan for intra-library correspondence. Apparently they'd gone to... yeah, I looked at that too. They apparently had gone to a conference there. And it talks about when I took this home, I didn't mean I'd be other than dull when I wrote in it, because basically he was dull in the other two. But I love this quote from the poet laureate, a man who has written over 70 books. Why am I all sorry? And so this was his makeup letter to them. Why? I mean, I can't imagine the man who obviously is one of America's apparent great poets of the 20th century regards himself, one is underlined and one he's apologizing for being dull. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, that's pretty interesting. I have behind me, I could show you my PhD dissertation, but talk about dull. I mean, on the technology acceptance model, you don't want to hear about it. I couldn't give those things away. I bought 10. I think I've still got... Did I ever give you one, Steve?
I think I started to read one. Yes, you did. I enjoy reading things that I have to look up words in. I mean, what can I say? It's funny. That's it. There's something... Are you... do you have more on that?
I'm not going to plug my dissertation, really. That was not where that was going.
Okay.
I think that self-doubt is the marker of a great man, and by man, humankind. I think self-doubt in one's work, especially as an author or a poet, is actually a really virtuous thing, because it allows you to, reflect and be self-aware and self-edit. And I was reading something on authors yesterday, and it was talking about that characteristic as opposed to, because I was kind of reading a little bit more about the Inklings girl, the Rose McKittrick Ross, and she had complete lack of self-doubt. She literally thought that she was, going to be the next Dickens. And so self-doubt can be very well served and well placed, even among the great.
Well, actually,
it doesn't become a hang-up.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing wrong with whatever you internalize and work out, great.
Right.
When it, becomes, Look, one of the things that has been crossing my desk this week has been a lot of, how can I say it? Minor fiction titles, but everybody always asks us, what should we put away for the future? What should we put away for the future? The history of our trade has never touted books as collectible investments. By no means am I doing it here. But because of something that happened, I might have a suggestion for people. Not sure it's this way geographically universal, as in maybe in Florida it happens less than it does up north. But if you're starting to find books from the 60s, the 30s, the 40s, and so on, and they are in dust jackets, is it worth it to start speculating on minor fiction? Well, I found somebody that did more than speculate on it. Because of their store, and the store I will happily mention is Bookwise up in Boca Raton. David Wolf got a bunch of the bought a bunch of the books from this book buy for the simple reason, and I was listening to the way he said it, we just don't see books and jackets from that time period, even though they're not, we're not talking about the Faulkners, Hemingways, Fitzgeralds, and 27,000 other names. These are more minor fictional appearances. And, it seems there's an interesting market for them. And because of the importance of the dust jacket, who knows what that might play in the future. But I found it interesting to see and then contemplate what he said about it, that, down here we just don't see it that much. So, Kara, where are you in Florida? You're north of us.
I am north of you, Steve, and south of Thorne. I am basically west of Fort Lauderdale. Yeah.
When you go out buying, do you see older books with any great degree of frequency now? Or is it, when you walk into places where you might go book hunting or to an estate sale or something, do you do that, I ask?
I do, yeah. I definitely scout more when I am traveling and, when I'm digging around in the Midwest or New England. And so I do see a difference when I am here. But pretty recently, I went down to a buy on Key Biscayne, and not pretty recently because I've kind of been out of the circuit for a few months. But the last one I did at the end of last year, her husband was a collector, not of serious nature. So he was a collector in the sense that he had a lot of books, but nothing was particularly precious. So there wasn't anything major there for me. But I did see jacketed books from that mid era and I think that you're really smart to tell people, prospect. Yeah. Beyond the dust jacket thing, looking for minor or, hidden or suppressed kind of things is definitely the way to go. We talked a little bit about stumbling upon a collecting area that isn't already white hot. I mean, that's not fun if you can't ever get any trophies. If everything is already out of reach, how fun is that? If you look to the minor collecting areas, to the niche of the niche, to minor Victorian poets, you've probably got something. Death is a Kind of Love, Christopher. Yeah.
Christopher Fry, one of 600. Yeah,
that's where you can have some fun and you can build up a collection that actually speaks to your interest and you can afford to play.
It's not so much for my collecting interest. It might be for selling interest, but I will tell you, with a book like this is one of the books. Okay, it's Christopher Fry. It's in beautiful condition, 1980s, small press, one of 600 copies. There's colophon statement in the back indicating that. I'm trying to line it up with the camera. There we go. And there were also 50 deluxe. But this is the kind of book that I want to see what happens in the New York market, meaning this company that we talked about them last week. I was talking about them earlier in the program on Bucks in the day, and that is Jasper 52, because I need a refresher course on what's going on and some of the things in the market. We just don't see it the same way, and I think that having a chance to experiment like that will be able to tell you, I call it EIBS, experiments in book selling, and I think I'm up to number 932, but, that's what we're doing, so if you, again, I offer this to anybody that's in the audience right now. I'm sorry, but the craft services in the green room are now struck, but if you have a question for us.
Comment below.
Comment below. Give us I see. Well, let me see something.
What's going on?
I made what's going on in the messenger box? Well, I see. What do I see? Hal's wife, Jane Kenyon, was also a great poet who died young too. Lindsay wrote that one. I didn't have the message on at the moment. Apologies there. But I don't see where anyone else came in yet.
Well,
if you're listening to this on replay or you're listening to this live, remember the Rare Book Cafe is on every week at 2:30. Be Live TV, because you're watching us there now. We want to thank everybody at Be Live TV for giving us this opportunity. The Rare Book Cafe is a book lover's rendezvous, and we hope you will join us. And now back to more meaty information after these commercial words.
Thorne has something. He's been so patient.
Okay, well, I just think I have a good story and a bad story about buying for the future. The good one, the most bad story, I guess, is about a bookseller who I never met. But about 40 years ago, there was a show in England called Printing in the Mind of Man.
Oh, yeah.
It's a famous show. There's books about it. I've got
Great
a couple.
book. It's a fabulous book.
And there was a bookseller in London who went out and he made his career, his specialty, only on the books that were in that show. And he did
Many
this
people did, yeah.
But the point, he finally retired when the very last, there were several books in there, and not so much the Gutenberg Bible and that kind of thing, that became unavailable. You could not complete that show anymore. You cannot complete Poe now because the last Tamarand has been sold. But so those kind of things.
The last known extended copy, yeah.
Do we know that?
We don't know that. We still have hope.
I still have dreams.
I want to tell you a story what happened to me.
Okay.
I was buying an estate a couple of years ago, and boxes came through, many signed books from people. And one of the books there was a book called Stoner. And as a child of the 60s and 70s, that had special meaning to me. My best friend in high school's dog was named Stoney. And my assistant manager, who most of you know, Michelle, her nickname in high school was Stoner. So there we have it. Grab the book, in chest jacket, little thin book, absolutely nothing, never heard of it, non-event author. And then so I'm looking through some pricing situations, and I noticed that there was a couple of reprints of this book. And then I found a couple of copies that weren't $5 copies. They were substantially valuable, so I wanted to research it. It turned out that this was a semi-autobiography book by a gentleman who was there's no other way to put it, this is how the descriptions went, a loser liberal arts English professor at a very small, non-important college in the Midwest. I mean, okay, this is not Harvard, boys and girls. Well, it turns out he actually wrote some poetry which nobody has ever found. And this was not the most popular book of all time. I think it had a production run of several thousand, most of which got pitched, and became quite valuable because 30 or 40 years later, almost every PhD English major who graduated from someplace and ended up being a faculty member at a smaller, and I would like to say distinguished, middle of American college, started signing this as a textbook because it was their story. And
right.
They fell in love with it. And this thing, you couldn't give this book away in the 60s or 70s when it was published. And now I've only seen one other copy, and it was in the multiple hundreds of dollars, and it was nowhere near as good shape as mine. So you never can tell. The reverse of that is I was told, maybe Steve could tell me or Kara, that Bridges of Madison County, when the movie came out, you were looking at first editions for $500 or something like that. And now they're all over the place for $20 bucks.
There's a lot of titles like that. There are a lot of titles like that. When the movie came out, it was hot.
Right.
Cold Mountain is one.
Signed Obama's, how about, Dreams of My Father was spiking way into solid five figures pre-election and as he cornered, his victory. So, hyper moderns riding really very spiky waves, but that's the nature of the hyper modern market.
But
it's a great story.
I went to small school in the Midwest, so it's like, oh man,
that's so cool.
It's good luck.
With the word hypermodern, you also have to throw in that word speculative fiction sometimes. Yeah. That's I haven't heard the word hypermodern in quite a while. Yeah, no, it's the circles I run in. What can I tell you? We're all nonfiction people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm an ology girl too, but that's great. That's a good one. And that can happen, Oprah mentions it, any kind of cultural spike. But that is really not the same long tail game as, buying. Well, in the 20th century, people would buy to the Grolier 100. When the first Grolier 100 came out in the 20s, that was absolutely. And the thing about that whole era of collecting, you've touched on this many times, I'm sure, in your show, when we talked about Rosenbach and there was a current that most people moved along, and you were to have that set of books. The really savvy collections and the ones that now we're like really in awe of typically veered from that somewhat, and we're visionaries usually pan out long tail game. So back to going to something that's a minor poet or a minor author or something that is under the radar of current collecting trends, that's actually where you can come up with something that is more complex and sophisticated and unique, that will probably be the thing that is more, long-standing. And follow your passions. Just follow your passions, you know?
Follow your passion, follow your heart. And, if we knew what books to buy in the future, it would be great. But the way they're publishing now, it's, like I said, I've drawn that imaginary line in the sand at 1980. Because prior to that, you had a chance of, first edition, first book by an author being published in a run that wasn't like they do today. So It kind of takes the first edition hiatus out of the game.
It does. When there's already 500,000 of something because somebody's already signed 4 novels deep and they're already a celebrity before it's even hit the block. It's not that, there's no scarcity and sexiness there. You've got to get multiple association, the guy's thumbprint and his, firstborn's tears.
Oh, who did that series of books with the thumbprint? We'll come back to that one.
Oh.
We've got to take a little break first.
Okay. I don't think he meant to break like that. We're still live. There we go.
Lindsay's back. Hey, Lindsay.
Well, Steve needed to take a quick break for me to remind you, if you just joined us, you're watching the Rare Book Cafe on Facebook Live. We're here with Kara Accettola, Thorne Donnelley, Steve Eisenstein, and his bride Edie will join us shortly. We appear every Saturday from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. You can also join us for our new program, Book Week, a news show on Thursdays on our Facebook page at 12 o'clock. And you can also join Steve earlier today and every Saturday from 12 until 2 Eastern Time at Bucks on the Bookshelves page on Facebook, and also on WDBFradio.com. That's all one word. It's an internet station. And we're also glad to be able to tell you that this week we are rolling out something new as a benefit to members of the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, who make all of this possible, and the Booksellers Association, who make the book fair possible. We are bringing out advertising, or sponsorships, I should say, for members who, by virtue just of being members, and by virtue of being good citizens of the book republic of the world, get mentioned on our shows from here through the end of the year. We're giving something back just because you're good people, you come to the book fair, and we like you. So we're glad to include among our honored sponsors of this program, Kara's own Little Sages Books, Thorne's Liberty Books, As Time Goes By in Marion, Alabama, Quill and Brush in Dickerson, Maryland, The Ridge Books in Calhoun, Georgia, and Mike Slicker's own Lighthouse Books here in Florida, celebrating its 40th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Having done my commercial duties, I will bring Steve back now, who has things to tell you.
We're back.
We're waiting for the
Lindsay.
Steve. I wonder what it is. Let's
There
see.
he
What is
is.
it? What is it? What is it?
Commercial.
What is it?
What did I miss?
He says you've got something to tell us.
And we're all
Oh, I
excited.
do. I'm going to start it out a little humorously. Do you give good phone? Okay, what's it like when somebody calls you, or you're an amateur beginner and you're calling a bookstore? There's a right way to do things. There's a wrong way to do things. And, I'm going to say that let's call this in the middle. I've been doing this for about 47 years. If I haven't said hello, books, 100,000 times, I probably never said it, or whatever I might be saying, at that moment. A book, a brack shop, may I help you? Many acquainted forgotten volume books. That was hell on checks and hard on the phone. But yeah, we've all talked on the phone. So there's two things about the phone. You're either new at it and you might pick something up. You're really good at it and you don't need this, or you've been at it a long time and you need a refresher course, okay? So all of this is said with all of that in mind. So let's start it out with the simpler part. You are a beginning book person and you want to describe a book to a person over the phone. The first thing that I'm going to tell you, and I think this might generate some laughter, is please don't read the subtitle. Okay? Give me the author. Thank you. Give me the author. Give me the title. Give me the city of publication. Give me the year of publication. I'll even help you figure it out if there's more than one on the title page. Give me the edition, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on that because chances are you got points to deal with if it's a good book, and of course it won't be the right points, and of course the publisher's name. So, and then the condition of the book. Now I tell you this, if you ask somebody if a book is leather or cloth bound and they can't answer it, it's an indicator as to how your conversation is going to go. But generally speaking, over the years, I think the consensus of opinion might be sound effects, phone ringing, ring, ring. Hi, I have some books to sell. My uncle died. My aunt died. Somebody always has to die. But, you know, the books are there. So one is a conversation like that. And let's take it from the top. My uncle died. I have some books to sell. What would I say to that? The first thing, sorry to hear about your loss, because unfortunately when people are selling us books, it's usually due to death or moving or taxes. Okay, do you know anything about the content of the library? No, I don't. Yes, I do. All right, let's take it with no, I don't. May I ask you a few questions, okay?
We should have role-played this.
Well, let's go for it. Whatever you go, ad-lib with me. Take it away. I'm leaving a lot of open lines.
Bric-a-brac, you're bric-a-brac. Yeah, go on.
Okay, bric-a-brac shop. May I help you?
Hi, I've got these bookshelves, and they are causing the house to lean to one side. So I've got to get.
Welcome to my world, lady. But you know, does your spouse put up with your collection? No. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. No. But that was my serious lead-in. Okay, so we've got it. You've got a collection. Okay, what do you want to hear? Yes.
Well, what I would like to know is a couple of things like this. Okay. Obviously, we told you how to describe the collection, but let's say, you know, if the person says, no, I have no knowledge, then, you know, you got to go look. You can't not go look. But if you want to qualify and quantify the buy, here's some food for thought. Okay. Number one, do you know anything about the collection? Yeah, I've looked at it. Okay, that tells me a lot right there. Tell me more about your uncle now. Did your uncle hunt? Did your uncle fish? Was your uncle an artist? Was your uncle a poet? Tell me about your uncle.
Yeah. We want to hear they were a wealthy professor, don't we?
Or poverty-stricken and loved that fact.
Smart, and we want to hear that they were interested in different things, and we want to hear that they traveled the world, and we want to hear that they had the space to, right?
They worked for Scribner's and were best friends with F. Scott Fitzgerald. Other things
this like weird that. File cabinet from Brentano's. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's still locked.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you know, so you want to try and get polite feelers out. You know, maybe they looked at the collection and they can tell you, well, there's a lot of art, there's a lot of this, there's a lot of that. But you have to be able to elicit some of this information that they know subconsciously. You know, you've got to be able to make them think in terms of, you know, pictures and structures and things like that. How many books? That's one of my key questions. How many books? I want to know what I'm up against. Go ahead, Kara. Go ahead.
Well,
looked like you were going to say something.
There's a few in this one room, and then there's a bunch in this other room, and there's this other room that I was never allowed into as a child. Yeah, that's the room we want. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay. But let me ask you about the rooms you were allowed in as a child.
Right.
Were they big wall units or were they individual bookcases?
Ooh, what would be the answer we want there? I mean, I'm playing both sides here because I'm imagining
Either way, there is no right or wrong answer on that.
Oh, I think what we would want to see is everywhere you looked was a little nook that my uncle had filled with books. And some of these had glass and some of them had lead seeded glass. I grew up in the Morgan. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, yeah. Okay, well, once they tell you, can they bring it into feet? In other words,
exactly.
All right, there's 5 shelves, they're 4 feet wide, multiply it around the room or, whatever else you're doing. But at 9 to 11 inches per book, if you can get an idea of how many running feet of shelf space you have an idea of how many books you're going to be dealing with, and of course, are any of them exceptionally large? Do you remember anything about these books when you were a kid? Did you, you also want to find, did they color in them? What are you doing? There's a lot of subliminal questions that you can ask that will help become, it'll help you paint a better picture in your mind's eye. Some stores get so many calls that they have to quantify and qualify the buys.
Yeah.
Personally speaking, that's never happened to me, that I've gotten so many calls that I wouldn't go out on them.
Right.
But there is some that if you qualify and quantify, you can eliminate or, just get the good feeling, yes, there's here, there's not here.
Yes.
But the one thing that I learned after 3 weeks ago was this. I was speaking to the daughter of a book collector whose science fiction collection was auctioned at Swans.
Nice.
It was the mystery collection that I was going to be looking at. There was supposed to be 200 boxes with 15 books in a box. And what I learned from that lesson is, even after all these years and all these questions, the books are never going to be as described on the phone.
Nope.
Okay, never.
Always be prepared to be surprised.
But you've got to have the effort and diligence. If you're new, you've got an idea what to ask for. If you've been at it a long time, I haven't told you anything that you haven't heard, but maybe, you've been at it too long and you need to take a refresher course. We've all been there and done that at one time or another. And I hope this little segment, brought you some information and some tips that might help you if you ever make a call, if you ever get a call that turns out to be something really great. We would love to hear about it from anybody that's listening to this program on replay, on live. Remember, the Rare Book Cafe is the book lovers rendezvous, and we love to hear from you. I want to thank you for giving me the time for this segment, and I know that Dr. Donnelley has some great book information to also enhance your book knowledge. So take it away, Thorne.
All righty.
What's up, Doc?
All righty. Well, here I am, and here we go. And I see Lindsay has been beautifully prepared and already set up my first set of books. What I'm going to talk about today is a gentleman by the name of Lighthouse. The best way to really start is there's a gentleman by the name of William Reese. I think a lot of us in the book business know he was one of the foremost dealers in Americana, books of the American world. His quote about this guy is the one bibliography I actually keep in my desk. It's the single most valuable book of its kind. And another quote is, if it wasn't in house, it usually wasn't worth buying. This guy was a bookseller an American bookseller in Chicago primarily in the 20s. He died, and there will be a quiz today too. I want to point that out. He died in 1978, and he wrote 3 editions. As you can see, there's 5 books up there, but the main editions we're going to be talking about, the one in the middle, black, the first edition. The second edition is the brown book, which is the second edition. That's the one most people use. And the third is called the final edition, and you'll notice, even though it has a title of Lighthouse at the top, it's written by somebody named Hartley. So there's been some slight switching over the years. But if Lindsay would be kind enough to switch to the second screen for me here, I happen to have, as you can see, all 3 copies of the editions here. And the second one that's coming up here actually has a very lovely signature from from Wright himself. And he wrote a lot of interesting ones. This one, who's interested in the Pioneer West, meets with his approbation. So I have a true first edition. It's the larger one there, and it is signed by him, and quite nice. And I just got that, and it's really kind of fun. It's interesting that first edition only sold about 1,500 copies. If you notice the difference in sizes there, It was done on fairly inexpensive paper. They didn't think it was going to sell that well. The second one, the brown one, is the one that most people will say. What they write here is a good example of the inside of the second edition. As you can see, it's a reference book. Name, brief description of the book. They've changed the format a little bit, but what you'll generally see is you'll see someone quoting something like House P329. That means it's Mr. Peters, and it's listed number 329. That number does bounce around from the various ones. But what really happened is he spent another 8 years. The first one was done in 1954. He turned around and waited for a while. Took him 8 years to come out with a second edition. By then, I believe he was in his 70s. For a really, really great description of what I'm talking about, it's one of the major book clubs in America. Kara and I are both members of the Grolier Club in New York. The main one in Chicago is called the Caxton Club, named after the famous British printer. And it's caxtonclub.org. And if you go in and you type WOWES, there's about a 15-page article that includes the litigation about after he died and all that kind of stuff. But so if Lindsay would go to my next slide here, this is from the third edition, which was published in 1994. It's called the Final Edition. It's got some additional ones. As you can see, it's a much thicker volume. I happen to have one. They only made 850 copies of this one. Without boring everybody, there's a lot of litigation involved between his estate, the Newberry Library, but another gentleman did what's called the Final Edition. So sometimes you'll see somebody quoting from the Final Edition. If you look at, if Lindsay would go to my next slide, we will see from the inside of my personal copy of the Final Edition here. Like I said, I have I have all three of them coming up, although my second copy is not a first printing, it's a second printing, but nobody's perfect. This here is this is the U.S. Referendum. I guess we may have missed the one that I was looking at. There was another with another signature there that was a copy of his address. That was, this is positively.
That's a good one. That's another good one. Yeah.
That's a good one right here. And there's one that actually matches that, which would be the next one. It should be the inside page here. Positively the last work. Fun stuff, written good, but there's, if Lindsay can just keep coming through the next one here, we'll see what comes up. Now, we're a little out of sync here, so we keep getting the same picture. The next one also has a signature of it. And then the two that come up at the end, I have copies from William Reese, who Mr. Howes wrote apparently 70 catalogs in his life as a bookseller.
Nice.
But William Reese has, and I have, it's a 3-volume set of about 10 years ago. William Reese and Company had had a sale on books that were in the U.S. IANA, and so this being one of them right here, we have another picture of it. So there's actually catalogs of his catalogs, which is kind of fun. Kara and I were talking about this before on how it can come up. People have asked me what US IANA is. Oh, here we go. This is one of the three. This is a sale catalog from the Reese Company about 20 years ago. They had some extras. They bound about 40 copies, I understand, in a sets of 3. I think probably still have a couple of them from sale. I bought mine aftermarket. They're nice, but again, you have some incredible descriptions in here.
Absolutely. Which
I just wanted to take the time. Well, first I wanted to explain what USINA means. IANA. People would think it's like International American Native something. I've heard all kinds of crazy things. What it really is Mr. Howe was discussing. There's a term which Mr. Reese is quite famous for, Americana, which really means North American books. Canada, Mexico, some people even say it's North and South America. So what Mr. Howes wanted to do was quite simply was make it United States. So it's only books to the continental political United States. There's nothing in Canada, nothing from the South American countries, nothing from Spain. So he made up his own words, which is why the last book, the one that we had that one picture of, it has a slightly different and more logical title. But even looking through the Reese one or others, or the Caxton article, and I just want to take some time and read a couple. These are book descriptions. We all read book descriptions, but some of my favorites. So this is about the history of Illinois by Henry Brown, New York, 1884. And Mr. Howe's description, chronologically the first, intrinsically the worst history of this state. He's an opinionated guy.
Yeah, he calls it like he sees it.
Lessons for the Present. It's by a Southern gentleman by the name of Edmund Ruffin, 1860. An ingenious effort, this, to awaken the South to the inevitability of a sectional war and the advisability of immediate succession. Ruffin fired the first shot of the Civil War at Fort Sumter, and after Appomattox and the collapse of his anticipated Confederacy, he triggered another shot into his own brilliant but erratic brain. I mean, that's the kind of description that you just don't get about books. And, and I just kind of thought, well, that's, it just goes on. Additional fabrications by this hoary-headed father of liars. I mean, just reading the guy's description.
It's awesome.
There are actually, depending on which edition, either 11,450, 11,620. His second edition, apparently, he added about 150 titles. He deleted about 50 titles. There seems to be no record of why that happened. The last volume, the third volume, which I said he really wasn't connected with, they say it has 11,622. I think again they corrected a little bit. So these are entries. Obviously, I've heard this book. I was actually first just saw it. One of the professors, I can't remember which one at the Rare Book School, mentioned that it was airplane reading. And you're sitting there. If you read a descriptive bibliography of, let's call it Poe, or pick an author, it tells you the publisher, the prince, maybe where it was or something like that. It is boring with a capital B. Mm-hmm. This guy, the first couple sentences are truly the bibliographical description. But then if he's gotten an interest, and apparently people have asked, how did he get 11,000 books to write about? You know what? Apparently he had a set in his bookstore about 50 behind, like you and I both have, little black books, and they were all the books he handled in the 20s, 30s, 40s. Like I said, it was first published in 54, and they were his notes, and they were the books he flat thought were important. And I guess the way it turns out, everybody else said those were the 622 books that if you had them all, well, A, you would probably rival the Library of Congress for your collection, but B, those are the books that his time frame is 1650 to 1950. So like Stephen, you were talking about, he thinks anything after 1950, of course he wrote it in 54, but anything before 1950, and obviously America got going long before 1650, he had to make a cutoff of where he felt that they were important. But this is one man's judgment, talking about standing the test of time. At 63 years old, I have seen these books occasionally looking like the dog chewed them in a bad moment for $50. But I mean, or $30, whatever. But you're going to lay out the $50, $75, $100 for a copy. And like most people, I mean, mine literally.
You'll use it forever.
There are my three. I can see it here. Here is the brown copy. But it is truly where I can reach right to it. It is one of my favorite books. And the quiz I was going to tell you about, which we didn't get really a chance to do, is in the final, I guess I didn't send the copy. It's called the final edition. There's some litigation about. On the front page, it says, right here, it says personal copy and the address, which is the correct address on State Street. So the answer to the quiz, now let us go back, is that I mentioned that Mr. Howes passed away, I believe, in 1978. I don't know if I mentioned that this book was published in 1994. So therefore, I feel the fact that this is Mr. Howe's personal copy, published 20 years after his death, is highly questionable. But maybe, this was a pretty wild guy. He might be still around. So that's pretty much what I've got.
He's pulling an Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, he's doing something interesting, though.
Yeah.
So.
It's Edie! Thank you so much, Thorne. That was awesome. That was awesome. We're leaving reference corner and we're heading over to Tiny Corner.
Here I am.
Yay.
How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Good. I'm so glad to be here. I'm going to be talking about Alla T. Ford. Alla T. Ford was a woman that lived in Lake Worth, Florida. She loved children's books. She especially enjoyed Oz books. And the joy of collecting children's books was something that she had written. But she loved Baum and she loved Oz. She died, unfortunately, in 1994 at the age of 84. But one of the books that I have to show is, where am I? Wait a minute, here. Here we go. The Love of Oz, okay?
Oh.
Now, this is Hijinks of L. Frank Baum. And one of the poems in here was Susan Doosan. On love's sea with me you should be cruising, Susan Doosan. All my worldly wealth you might be using. I adore you more and more each day. So fill me full of bliss by giving me a kiss. Oh, Susan Doosan, oh. And these are all Baum's little ditties. And in the back is signed and numbered. This is one of 500 of the copies.
Nice.
And this is number 370, and it's signed by her. Another book that I'm going to show that is hers is UFOs in Oz. Now, obviously, this is not a miniature book, but I have this same book in a miniature book. This one was done in a limited of 500, but mine is not numbered in the back. It just states the limitation. So it's an overrun, but the pictures in it are flying.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
Which are extraordinary.
Oh, they're great. Yeah. Look at that.
And so page after page, it's UFOs in Oz and things that they found that were flying in Oz. And it's just a book, all illustrations, and they are all numbered and beautiful.
That is so cool.
But what's really cool, Kara, is I got this from Kara in the mail this week.
Aww.
And I was absolutely thrilled. What this is a postcard of and you can see it's in a spoon to indicate the size of it. And it is the original little miniature book that was done in a walnut. And what you have done is to give me my topic to show my World's Fair walnut.
Oh, your walnut.
Yes.
Week. Oh, cool.
Now, did I have this note? Did I get this with a beautiful note? Lovely stationery, Kara. In case you didn't have this one, thank you for being you. I thank you for being you, Kara. That was just so kind of you. Good forward. We will meet. We have to meet and get together for lunch. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But this is the original postcard that was done this. And I don't have it, but what you have done is to now give me a new dimension of how miniature books were advertised. Yes, I see them from a publisher. I see them in a catalog. I see them in the back of the micro bibliophile offered, etc., in someone's list. But now, thanks to you, Kara, I can really, really look for original advertising, and I thank you so much. Perfect timing 2 days before my birthday.
I didn't know. That's great.
So thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
And now I'm going to give you back to my handsome husband, who I know will do something wonderful.
I always love to see her books. She's really quite knowledgeable about them, and she has a very, very large collection. I believe it's in the hundreds and maybe more than that she's got for a while. And my family's in the printing business, so we make large books, and it amazes me how small these things are, the quality of the craftsmanship, the fact they are readable. A lot of them are famous books that we all know about. I've got one of the U.S. Constitution, things like that. Yeah, and they're really. I just get jealous every time I'm packing or unpacking my books from a book fair, and I go, "Why am I not a miniature book dealer with a briefcase full of 400 books or something?"
Exactly.
Oh, the first time I did the Long Island Antiquarian Book Dealers Fair, I told the story in the first edition of the story I wrote for Microbibliophile. We've got about 30 seconds before we close, but this was 2 hours before a show the Long Island Antiquarian Book Fair was to set up. My first ever show to sell at. I'm looking at my friends Harvey and Jimmy, and I'm saying, why is this booth empty? Are they going to let us set up in it? And they started laughing. They just watch. About a half hour later, a guy shows up, just as you're talking about, a couple of zero boxes, $100,000 worth of books. This is 1970s, early dollars. And, boom, last one in, first one out. The miniature book dealer.
Happy night.
They never have booksellers bad back. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for joining us today in the Rare Book Cafe. If you're watching us on replay, you can send questions to us at the Rare Book Cafe at gmail.com. We want to thank BeLive TV for hosting us, Lindsay Thompson for running the switchboard, Alan Smith for creating the program. Kara, Lindsay, and I thank you for joining us. We will see you in the next edition of the Rare Book Cafe. The shrimp was fine if anybody had craft services. See you later, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
That's great. Yeah, I can't wait to hear more about how the miniature books do at the fair, because